everybody, and welcome to the show. As a reminder, every Saturday I air an interview or solo episode, and every Wednesday I air a live, unscripted, unproduced coaching session. So make sure to check both those out. If you've been listening for a while, thank you so much. And if you have any time to leave a rating or review for the show, I'd appreciate it. If you're new to listening, welcome. Today, we are going to be talking about microdosing. Microdosing is something that we'll explain in the interview, and it's something that I have been doing for well over a year now and has been really helpful to my overall well-being when used intentionally. I am someone who really values optimal health and well-being. And so I'm always researching, not just trying out, but researching first, and then trying different ways to support my biochemistry, my mental and physical and emotional well-being, and just my life in general. And microdosing, especially through Golden Rule, has been a big part of that. So let me tell you about who I'm speaking with today. Her name is Tiffany Hurd, and she is the microdosing advisor and head of partnerships at Golden Rule Mushrooms, where she leads education, partnerships, and community initiatives. Beyond Golden Rule, Tiffany is a microdosing advisor, business leader, mentorship, and speaker with over a decade of experience in pioneering the use of psychedelics for healing, growth, and professional development. Microdosing is something that can help unlock clarity, creativity, emotional balance, and resilience through intentional microdosing. And I have found the Golden Rule products the best at doing that. The products I really love, but I encourage you to take the quiz that we talk about in this show. I love Happy, Golden Teacher, Avery, and something called Rooted, which is actually a microdose of San Pedro. And we'll talk about that in the show. And I really wanted to bring Tiffany here because she shares her personal story about how microdosing has helped her and really is committed to helping individuals and teams reach their peak performance through neuroscience-backed microdosing strategies. And if you are interested in learning more about Golden Rule, and perhaps you've gone down the microdosing rabbit hole and are looking for a company that you really trust to get your products from, I am an affiliate for Golden Rule, and you can order through my link and get 10% off, christinehassler.com/microdosing. And I just want to say that this podcast is for informational purposes only. It isn't medical advice in any way. Everyone's situation is different. And if you explore anything mentioned here, you do so at your own discretion. But again, I have really found microdosing supportive and gentle. And I really love that, especially when you're going through a company like Golden Rule, you are empowering yourself. You're learning, you're trying the products, you can titrate the dosage. It just really puts a lot of autonomy and power into your hands. So again, you can check out Golden Rule through my affiliate link, christinehassler.com/micro. All right, and now on to my conversation with Tiffany. Tiffany, welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have you here.
Thank you so much. Very grateful to be here as well.
And I didn't plan it like this, but I happened to have two back-to-back episodes talking about generally psychedelics. I interviewed Keith Kurlander last week, and we talked about his new book, Psychedelic Therapy, A Revolutionary Approach to Restoring Your Mental Health and Reclaiming Your Life. And that was more about, I would say, more therapeutic medical uses in a therapeutic setting, so higher doses. And we briefly talked about microdosing. And I shared about my experience with how I use microdosing very intentionally. And we're going to have a long conversation about it today. I'm sure people have lots of questions. And I'm so excited that you're here to talk about it all with me today.
Likewise, one of my favorite topics to discuss.
Well, and I said to Keith, and I'll say it to you, and I say to most people on the show, I have found that when people get into a very niche specific field that has to do with helping people and is maybe even, for lack of a better phrase, out of the box, they definitely have a personal story. They definitely have an embodied wisdom, a passion that fires and drives why they're so passionate about what they talk about. So I'd love to hear your journey and why you are so passionate and why you work in the world of microdosing now.
Hmm. Yes, I certainly have a personal experience and story that led me into this beautiful path and direction of the field that I'm working in. And so I started microdosing 11 years ago. And prior to that, I did what most people do and worked with psychedelics and plant medicines more recreationally, not intentionally, not in the ways that I do today. It was paired with drinking and all those sorts of practices. And so I started to work with it more intentionally 11 years ago, like I shared. And that journey started when I was in corporate. And so I was in corporate for 16 years. I was in the medical field. And I was specifically in pharmaceuticals and medical device and business development and strategy from an executive perspective, doing the complete opposite of what I'm doing now. I was truly convincing doctors to use our pharmaceuticals to prescribe their patients through our pharmacy. And so it's really interesting how it weaved into the world that I am today. And it does make a lot of sense. And so at that time, I was successful. I was enjoying the work somewhat that I was doing. But I feel like it kind of just happened one day where I woke up, and of course it built to this direction. But I woke up one day and just felt exhausted and burned out. And I was on medication for 6 years. I was on Adderall, I was on Lexapro, and I was doing personal development. I was in therapy. I was navigating a challenging upbringing and all the things that I was working through within that category. And while all these areas were supportive and they were working, I just wasn't really reaching the deeper layers of where a lot of the root symptoms were coming from. And so I was working with a teacher at the time, and he asked me if I've ever worked with psychedelics or if I've heard of them. And a little bit, of course, like I said, because I was working with them recreationally, but I ended up educating myself a lot more. And over 11 years ago, nothing was mainstream in the ways, of course, that it is today. And so there was little information. But I learned enough. I had trusted access to psilocybin, and I ended up putting myself on a protocol to taper off my medication over that time. And so I consulted with my prescribing provider and just sort of put myself on this protocol. And I said, hey, I'm going to see if this is a supportive journey for me. Within 3 months, I was completely tapered off both of those medications. That's a disclaimer. I don't recommend it. It happened to work for me. And I paired it with lifestyle habits and therapy work and a lot of certain approaches along those lines. And if I can think back to how I was feeling after I was tapered off those medications, I was the most present that I felt like myself in my life. I felt the most alive. And I wanted to shift careers because I wasn't really as fulfilled as I would have loved to be. And I wanted to create something a lot more meaningful and fulfilling in my life. And so because I had such a positive experience with psilocybin, I want to bring this to people. I want to build a microdosing practice where I'm teaching people how to work with these different psychedelics and plant medicines and be a resource for what I needed that just didn't exist just yet. And so that's what I did. And I did that for about 4 years. I naturally started to facilitate higher doses of psychedelic plant medicines. And then I eventually bridged my business background with psychedelics and started to advise for companies in the space. And that led to working with Golden Rule, which I know we'll get into a little bit. And I'm our microdosing advisor, our head of partnerships, and at this point have supported thousands of individuals with establishing really beautiful microdosing practices.
Hmm. I love this. Thank you for sharing that. And we are going to get into Golden Rule because, as I mentioned in the intro, I am an affiliate and consumer of those products. And I shared more of my personal journey in the intro. There's going to be a lot of questions, I think. Some people are familiar with psychedelics and microdosing, some people are not. So let's just get to some of the questions. So, one of the things we talked a little bit about in the last interview I had with Keith is, well, if you're doing microdosing, it's not that different than taking like an antidepressant. And an antidepressant, he didn't say this, but a lot of people might be thinking something like an antidepressant is FDA approved. I don't give that a lot of worth, but some people might. And quote unquote safer. I get it from my doctor. This feels scary. What would you say to that?
I would say that that's very valid, and that's what we're used to. It's been normalized in our society. But what I can share is that there's so much research at this point that's been from really, really credible institutions. And again, the research is more targeted towards high therapeutic experiences, but microdosing is falling under that umbrella. But as a whole, psychedelics, plant medicines, they're actually validating to be much more safer and effective in a lot of ways, and also kind of provide similar experiences that an SSRI would without a lot of the side effects and withdrawal symptoms and those sorts of approaches that can find their way in with them. And because we're working with such low doses, you're not hallucinating, you're not tripping, you're fully functioning in your life. And it tends to be really safe and really effective once people can start to have their personal experiences with it.
Yeah, maybe we should actually backtrack and define what microdosing
Yes.
actually means.
Yes. So when I'm referencing microdosing, it's an intentional practice of taking a very small, it could be referenced as a subperceptual dose of a psychedelic substance, meaning the most common are psilocybin mushrooms, San Pedro, which is wachuma, which is a cactus, LSD, which is more synthetic, but it's from a fungi called ergot. And typically, what this references is 1/10 to 1/20th of what would be considered a recreational therapeutic dose. So it's super, super, super tiny. And like I said, you're not hallucinating, you're not tripping, you're fully functioning and present in your daily life. A lot of questions that tend to find their way in is, can I microdose and work? Can I microdose and take care of my children? Can I have normal conversations? And all of that is yes, yes, and yes. And you may just notice that maybe you feel a little bit more focused, more open, more present, more creative. And so the way that I like to think about it is, rather than one high therapeutic experience, it's a practice where you're microdosing usually 3 to 5 times a week over a consistent protocol period, usually anywhere from 90 days is what we like to see. And so it's more of kind of having this experience where you start to subtly shift and you start to, have these insights and these ways of viewing life with a little bit newer perspective. And there's a lot of benefits that I can share as we get going into it. It's a really subtle practice that you can cultivate on and off throughout, different ways of working with it intentionally or working with it for certain goals or certain therapeutic support.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about how plant medicine is different from synthetically manufactured. I was just using SSRIs, but we could talk about benzos. We could talk about, I know a lot of people are into beta blockers right now for anxiety. It seems like we're in an increasingly nervous system frazzled world. And, mental health is something that many, many people are struggling with. And despite all the tools that we have on the internet and all of that, we still seem to be dealing with so much nervous system dysregulation, anxiety, depression, things like that, either that hypoarousal or that hyperarousal. And so, how is plant medicine different from something you can get from your local Walgreens?
Mm-hmm. Yes, when we're referencing psilocybin or even San Pedro, they're truly grown from the earth. They truly are a plant medicine. They're grown from the ground, from the soil. It's a mushroom, it's a cactus. Whereas something more synthetic is more established in a lab, something like a pharmaceutical, an SSRI, et cetera. What's interesting is there are some common benefits with, what's happening actually from a scientific perspective in the body when we're working with, all of these sorts of different medicines. And so when we think of why most people tend to go on SSRIs, most of those therapeutic conditions are anxiety, depression, high levels of stress, PTSD, OCD, like, a huge areas of support. And what we're seeing is that while they are supporting mainly with increasing serotonin or increasing dopamine, depending on the individual's experience and the type of medication that they're on, ultimately psychedelics and plant medicines are doing that as well. And so what we're seeing, and I'll just kind of go into the science a little bit because I think that will help us kind of ground this in some ways, is when we're working with psychedelics, when we're working with plant medicines, and what I'm referencing there is plant medicines, San Pedro, psilocybin, psychedelic more, LSD, as it's promoting neuroplasticity. And that's enhancing the brain's ability to learn, to adapt, to shift patterns. What we're seeing is it's lowering inflammation, and that's directly connected to the serotonin receptors, mainly with psilocybin. It's supporting with forming new pathways in the brain. It's reducing a default mode network, which is allowing us to slow down and get more present. And ultimately, this is helping to regulate our nervous systems. And so when I think of the main difference is a lot of these medications, while they're providing symptom relief and you may feel less anxious, but you also at the same time may feel this baseline of getting in touch with your emotions. And so we tend to see the main difference there is plant medicines are actually helping you regulate your nervous system, but go and get in touch with a lot of the emotions that you might be experiencing that are presenting in ways that are creating the anxiety or the depression or the stress symptoms. And so it's more so a approach of getting in touch and getting to the root and sort of working through some of these patterns and behavioral experiences so that ultimately you can free yourself from it and cultivate a new perception around it. Whereas a lot of the medications are just sort of providing a symptom relief essentially.
Right, right. And I think it's a belief system switch, big time.
Hmm.
We're so conditioned to think that something a medical doctor from a pharmacy is safe versus something like plant medicine, which, only weird hippie people do, and is not okay. And I know, for me, I have seen in the 22 years I've been doing this,
Hmm.
a coach where really my lens is through developmental psychology, inner child work, really the emotional and subconscious side of things. And I have seen that people can do so much work in one lane and it
Hmm.
doesn't help them get to where they want to go. Meaning, if you only did psychedelics, you probably wouldn't get to where you want to go. If you only did, coaching or traditional talk therapy and you weren't experiencing change, it's probably not going to get you there. When we think about trauma or we think about challenging experiences in our life, it impacts us on the mental, the physical, the emotional, the social, the spiritual, the sexual level, like all levels. And I have found that people can do so much work, but their brain chemistry, the actual physical side of them needs a little support. So you mentioned neuroplasticity, and can you talk a little bit about how microdosing actually helps with our brain chemistry and actually helps to shift the brain out of some well-grooved patterns?
Such a good question. So I would say at a neurological level, they when we're microdosing, it tends to bind to serotonin and dopamine receptors in the brain, particularly like I shared the 5-HT2A receptor, which is a serotonin receptor. And essentially this is triggering sort of this cascade of effects, including the increased neuroplasticity, which, like I shared, is our brain's ability to sort of form these new connections, start to break old patterns. And so at the same time, it's creating these new pathways in the brain, which, if we think of behavioral patterns and certain things in our life that continue to repeat themselves in certain cycles, think of that as a pathway in the brain that is just sort of ruminating on this hamster wheel and it has no other options to sort of streamline down. Now, when we're working with these medicines, all of a sudden the left and the right hemisphere of the brain is communicating much more effectively. New pathways are being established. So you're no longer stuck or feel stuck in that same one because now you have options to choose from now that more have been established. And so that's really where we're seeing people have these, breakthrough transformational experiences because it's this huge relief and this huge way of having these whole new fresh perspectives of viewing something in their life that may have really been holding them back and for so many years. I mean, we can go as far as childhood. And so it's really, really effective in those ways. And so what we're also seeing with microdosing is it's supporting with neurogenesis, which also is the support of those new brain cells. And there's also evidence, which is really interesting too, is the BDNF, so the brain-derived neurotropic factor, which is almost the way that I love to view it as like fertilizer for our brain cells.
Mm.
And so all of this is happening even at these low doses, and it's enough to sort of have these really powerful experiences without having to have this full psychedelic, effect. And so, and still get the biological benefits with the consistent practice of microdosing.
Hmm. Hmm. It really is quite incredible because if we take our conditioning out of our brain for a moment and we think about the way the world was formed in nature, not by humans,
Mm-hmm.
really all cures exist in nature. The planet was really formed to be self-sustaining. And unfortunately, humans are really messing it up. But if we look to nature, so many answers are there. So many answers are there. And so, what I love about microdosing, especially things like psilocybin and San Pedro, and we can talk about LSD and other things in a moment, is that we're getting back to nature. I'd love to talk about the risks of microdosing. You mentioned, and I've been microdosing for a while now, and I've never felt it in the sense of like, ooh, there's something altering in my system. It's felt more like support, not an altered state in any way. I drive, I work, I am with my kid, I teach, I'm on stage, I'm on planes. Like, I've never felt altered. So maybe we can just drill down on that a little bit, the difference between like an altered state and a supported state, like what microdosing actually does to our state and
Mm-hmm.
nervous system, especially if you can touch on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it is low risk. And I would say that when we think of any sort of risk or just, contraindication at all can kind of go under this umbrella. The only main things to look out for with microdosing is if you have, a history with psychosis or schizophrenia, bipolar sort of finding its way in there, but we're starting to see San Pedro because it is so gentle and subtle actually supporting with that. There are some SSRIs. It's very, very minimal. You'll read a lot of conservative approaches around that, but again, it's quite safe. We have thousands of people in our community microdosing to even taper off SSRIs really, really effectively. And then if there are any serious heart conditions, other than that, it's very, very, very low risk. It's non-addictive. And so when we take that approach, to thinking, okay, if somebody's going to microdose and they're looking from, these sort of perspectives is if you're starting to microdose, you always want to start with a low dose. That's always the safest place to begin, usually with psilocybin or with San Pedro. And the only time that you may feel something that feels a little unsettling or ungrounding is if the dose tends to be a little too high for you, or if you're a little sensitive to it. You still absolutely should not be tripping or anything. I don't even like to use that word tripping. It feels so foreign, but anything unsettling. That's a very easy adjustment to recalibrate that dose. And that's why educating yourself or having a trusted resource where there's integration and there's education that's supporting you in cultivating this practice is really, really effective. And then, of course, if it feels good, right, you're going to know, you're going to feel grounded. You're going to feel maybe more open, more settled. Maybe if you came to it with the intention of feeling less, having alleviation of anxiety or depression symptoms, those over time will tend to really start to settle. And the days that you're feeling those will lessen and lessen over time. You should feel more present. If you're somebody who maybe reacts a certain way or gets triggered by certain things, you should start to find that response is a much more grounded and different response, just to name a few things.
I shared before that where it's been most helpful to me is on days where I haven't slept well. We have a little one. We're figuring out why, but we just got some answers. Just from day one, sleep has been really hard and wakes up multiple times in the night. And they're not fun wake up. She gets real dysregulated. And it's been really, draining. She's over 4 now. So, 4 years of that adds up. And those days where I'm just like so tired and perimenopausal, and I want to talk about microdosing for perimenopause as well. There's a specific strain I use called Happy, and it just helps take the edge off. It's sort of when I'm in those moments where I'm so depleted, what would usually register as like a 2-3 registers as like a 20, because I'm ultra, ultra, ultra sensitive. And so by using them really intentionally of like help me be the best mom to myself, to my daughter, like it was a hard night, but like, really set that intention as support, because that's how I really see him, not to dissociate, not to escape from dealing with my reality, because that's not what microdosing is doing, but that level of support, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference in my ability to to deal, honestly, with very little sleep. So let's talk a little bit about Golden Rule and why you got involved with Golden Rule and maybe some of the specific products in case people are interested in starting to explore microdosing.
Of course. So Golden Rule, we are a women-owned business. We've been around for 4 years. We're in Colorado, and we are a microdosing product-based business, but we really stand behind teaching people how to integrate these experiences. And we offer education and just community resources, because it's one thing to have, these beautiful products that we have and to work with them. And it's a whole other experience when you're really kind of handheld in a lot of ways, but you have the resources and you have the education and you have the integration to really intentionally and effectively learn how to cultivate a practice. And so a lot of the different products that we offer are a variety of psilocybin mushroom strains. We have single strains, we have blends, we have them in capsules and gummy form and chocolate form. We have San Pedro in a capsule form, which is the Wachuma cactus that I was speaking of. And then we have the LSD microdoses in gummy form as well. And so a lot of times when a lot of questions that we'll receive is, which one do I start with? How do I know which one to start with? And where do I start? And we have a free online quiz on Golden Rule, and that's always a really beautiful place to start. Is it'll guide you in what medicine and what product is going to best support you. And then we have these beginner kits as well that are fantastic for each of those three different medicines: the San Pedro, the psilocybin, and the LSD. And so whichever one you sort of gravitate towards, and then also looking at your individual experience and circumstance and things that you want to feel and experience, it's usually nice to kind of choose one of those. And then I host a monthly free workshop each month that you can come in and get your questions answered live and just, get educated and have a resource. And then we also have a free online community for anybody to join to also do the same thing in that place. So we really just are dedicated to that, is not just providing the product, but really supporting you through the whole journey. And everything we do is in-house. Everything is tested. Everything's in our warehouse, formulated in-house, and then accurately dosed so that there's consistency in the microdoses that you're working with.
Mm. Yeah. How do, like, for people that are like, okay, what does that mean consistently tested? How do I know it's not laced with anything? Where is this actually being grown? Can you speak more specifically about those things?
Of course, yes. So all of our functional and psilocybin mushrooms are grown in-house in our warehouse. And so we small batch test truly every single thing before we even send anything out, of course, as we're formulating everything and packaging it all. And then our San Pedro is from a direct grower, and then we bring it in-house and we test it in-house as well. And then the same thing with our LSD. It's from a lab, from a beautiful partner of ours. And then we bring it in-house, and then we formulate the final product in-house with both of those. And so everything is, like I said, it's in a facility in our warehouse where everything is organic. There's no pesticides, there's no bacteria, there's no mold, there's no toxins. And then we take our products, especially our psilocybin and our functional mushrooms, through a extraction process where it's essentially pulling out the medicine in itself without damaging it. And it actually makes it a lot more bioavailable on the body, so that you're never really feeling gassy or kind of stomach aches like some mushrooms tend to present in a lot of ways, especially with psilocybin mushrooms. It's just very clean and very high quality.
Yeah. Oh, and that's my experience. Let's talk a little bit more specifically. I mentioned perimenopause. I think there's been some research on microdosing in perimenopause. Or am I incorrect about that?
There has been. It's been minimal, but there's a lot of focus on it right now, which is really, really exciting because we need more of it. And so I'm excited to see what continues to progress. But what we're seeing the most is, with estrogen and the amygdala and the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex, like all those sorts of responses that tend to shift when we're in this state as women. Especially with the decline of estrogen, it impacts our brain, it impacts our body, it impacts our mood, it impacts our regulation. And so what we're seeing is that it's actually supporting mainly with the serotonin receptors, which are directly connected to our mood, our emotions. And so that's certainly impacting our experience in a lot of ways. And what we're seeing is that psilocybin is engaging on that neural system, which tends to be a little bit more dysregulated during menopause. And so it's sort of providing more of this sort of experience to influence more of those emotions and also influence more of the cognition that we tend to need a little bit more of. We're seeing psilocybin and San Pedro being the most supportive for premenopause and menopause, which is really exciting.
Wait, say that again. The what?
Psilocybin and
Yeah.
San Pedro, those two
Hmm.
tend to be the most supportive for menopause right now.
Hmm. And what about for someone that is more that hypervigilant? A lot of anxiety, a lot of overthinking, that kind of wired but tired feeling.
Yes, typically when we have higher anxiety, I would tend to go with more of San Pedro because it is going to be a lot more gentle and a lot more subtle. Whereas psilocybin can sometimes start to pull more emotions up to the surface. And that's not a bad thing, but you kind of have to take a look at your life of, okay, do I want to go into some of these emotions right now, or do I want something just a little bit more subtle and maybe another time I can go into that? We tend to see that. And then San Pedro tends to be a little bit more regulating on the nervous system compared to psilocybin in some ways, mainly because psilocybin is going to be more targeted towards the serotonin receptors, the mood, the emotions, whereas San Pedro is a balance between the dopamine and the serotonin receptors. It also is the most anti-inflammatory. Also, it has over 56 alkaloids, so that helps with lowering inflammation as well. So there's a lot of, really beautiful benefits with that medicine as well.
I love that. Okay. And I imagine things like this are not safe during pregnancy and breastfeeding, or if you are taking any other medication, is it contraindicated as well?
This is another area that a lot more research is coming. There's been a little bit of research on it, and we have many women who are breastfeeding postpartum, and they're having really, really positive experiences with microdosing, with psilocybin, and with San Pedro as well. Again, it's more of a personal experience, but what we've seen so far is that it's not at risk for child brain development or anything along those lines, and we're actually seeing that it's supporting women sort of feel a lot better, their moods, their symptoms of postpartum depression, like all of that is improving significantly. It's tough because it's truly just like an individual experience. I'm excited to
Hmm.
see what is going to come out more about it, but even if we think about this, when we think of plant medicines and we go back thousands of years ago, our ancestors have been working with these medicines while pregnant, while breastfeeding, during postpartum, and amazing experiences with that approach as well. And we're starting to see a lot of women today take that approach and utilize it in a really positive direction.
Yeah. I think it's such an individual thing because, you know, there are women who are on SSRIs during pregnancy and whatever. So this is what I love about microdosing is there's lots of information out there. I think Golden Rule is an incredible resource, but so much of this really is your intuition and
Mhm.
connecting to a medicine and really feeling into what might be useful for you. And if we think about indigenous cultures, they really worked with the medicine. They didn't relate to medicine as I'm going to take this substance and it's going to fix me. That
Mhm.
wasn't the relationship as well. And I think part of what the opportunity is in microdosing is to start to break out of the pattern of something outside of me is going to fix me. I'm going to take this pill to make myself feel better because one, it gives the power over to a substance. Two, it reinforces the belief that something is wrong with you.
Mhm.
So, you talked about being intentional with microdosing. Can you talk more about what you mean by that?
Yes, is coming into the practice with intention, coming into some sort of desire of something that you want to feel and you want to experience and you want to focus your energy on, something that is meaningful for you. And typically, when we're working with them more intentionally, it is a consistent practice, right? There's like an intentional, consistent approach that you're taking with it. And that's more of what I was referencing with, the certain days, 3 to 5 times a week, usually over a set protocol. And bringing even more intention into the practice as you're working with it over the week could look like maybe you're, if you have the time, 5 minutes a day, or an evening practice, a morning practice. Sometimes that doesn't exist, and you can just, kind of connect with yourself and slow down and get present before you receive and take the medicine, of just checking in. Hey, like, how do I want to receive support from the medicine today? Is there a certain practice that I want to cultivate that would be supportive to work with? Because when we reference these medicines, they do hold their own frequency, and you're going to start to feel that as you're working with them, of feeling guided and feeling supported. And they tend to work and pair really well with your intentions that you're bringing into, because you're emphasizing the presence of what you're wanting to cultivate within that exchange. And so a lot of times that could look like maybe you have a cacao and you pour your medicine in there, and you ground into the day, or you take a little walk in nature. Maybe you're journaling your intentions, and you're just creating some sacred intentional time with yourself to check in and to really connect with yourself on what it is that you really want to receive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's
And
more like a
that's
working.
medicine in itself right there, whether you're
Yeah.
working with psychedelics or not, to really slow down and just get present to what am I feeling and what do I want to receive.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit about LSD, because that's one of the things that I think can conjure up some images for people of
Mhm.
what that means. But I know that Golden Rule does offer
Mhm.
microdosing LSD. Let's talk a little bit about what that is. Is it truly a medicine? Is it more a synthetic? And how can it be useful?
Yeah, so there tends to be some pushback with LSD, like you said, because it is semi-synthetic. It's found in a fungus called ergot, and it's actually a really, really beautiful, powerful medicine. It's going to be more focused on the mind, more cerebral, more dopamine focused. And so a lot of people love to work with this medicine to feel more clear and sharp and productive and receive mental clarity. There's some great research that LSD is really supportive for individuals with ADHD, overthinking, overanalyzing. And you may be wondering, okay, well, if this is a medicine that's more cognitive and more cerebral focus, and I'm sort of overanalyzing, why would I want to be more in my head? And what we see is that it actually kind of penetrates and clears all the overthinking and allows for this consistent focus to be present. And that's really effective when you can kind of hone in versus feeling like you're kind of scattered in a lot of different directions. And what we see is that it's actually really light and it's really open. And while it does support you in sort of feeling this body experience, it is going to be more in that mental space. And so a lot of people, myself included, I didn't have that great of a relationship with LSD. I kind of always worked with it maybe with a higher dose and didn't have really pleasant experiences. And so I didn't work with LSD for probably over 9 years until I came to Golden Rule, and I tried ours, which are in microdosing forms. And it completely changed the dynamic and the relationship that I have with this medicine. And I microdose with it very, very consistently. And it's really, really supportive.
Mm. How many different strains of things can you be doing at once? I don't
That's
mean you, Tiffany. I mean generally.
Yes. Typically, what I always suggest is if you're working with a certain medicine, psilocybin, LSD, San Pedro, or you're wanting to, give each one its own stage for at least 30 days, especially being new to any of them, because as you start to feel the benefits or things are shifting and changing, you want to know, how is it that that particular one is supporting me? What is it actually supporting with? For example, you may start to work with one of them to be more productive or to be more present or to hone in on a certain project. And you may also work with it at a different dose at a different time for more, interpersonal sort of work. And you want to have an understanding of what dose works with what at what time, and what is it actually supporting with. And then once you kind of have the experience with each and you have that relationship and you have that sort of perspective, then it gets really enjoyable to mix them. So what we see a lot in our community is, some people will mix different strains on the same day, and maybe they'll take one that's going to be a little bit more active for productivity more towards the morning, and then maybe in the afternoon or the evening they want to ground down, and then maybe they'll take a little bit more of a mild strain. So you can totally work with different strains on the same day. You can work with them on different weeks. And then also, if you wanted to mix two different medicines together, that's also really supportive. For example, I will take LSD. Right now, I'm working with LSD 3 times a week. I'll take it in the morning and I'll take, 5 to 10 micrograms, which is either half a gummy or a full gummy of our sole product. And then in the afternoon, I'm taking 1 capsule of the San Pedro. And that just feels really, really nice and supportive.
Okay. And what would you say to, this is something else I've heard, people that are like, well, this is just like another addiction.
I would say that the research is very much so validating that it is non-addictive. And it's actually supporting you in reestablishing and reprogramming a lot of the patterns and behavioral perspectives that might be connected to addiction in a lot of ways because of the science that I spoke about, the neuroplasticity, the new pathways. And so it's actually reframing and reprogramming that belief and that internal biological response. And so we're actually seeing people come to this practice more intentionally, like I spoke of, but cultivating a relationship more within themselves that is more steady and is more grounded. And so, Harvard, Stanford, Imperial College, like there's really, really state of the art institutions that are validating that it is non-addictive.
Yeah. I mean, I think what the best thing for people to do is to try it. If it's something that you've been, I have found that with anything, especially plant medicine, even microdosing,
Mhm.
you get a nudge. You get some kind of nudge. It comes into your world.
Mhm.
Someone's mentioning it. You kind of keep seeing it. I feel like it calls you. Have you found that in working with it yourself and in working with as many people as you have, that by the time you get on the phone with somebody, they may say, yeah, I've heard about this, or I've been thinking about it for a while.
Absolutely. I hear it all the time. Myself, I experience it. I mean, quite honestly, when I was in corporate, I felt this nudge after I started working with it, working with psilocybin, and it was truly like pulling me into the direction of creating a business. And I kicked and I screamed because I go, there's no way that I'm leaving corporate to do this. But there's that nudge that was calling me. And I also, on the opposite side of that, I get it all the time. And in my inboxes of people saying, hey, I was feeling like I wanted to explore microdosing. And then all of a sudden your name popped up and now I'm messaging you. And now this is, leading to a place of having trusted access. So it really is. And I think that really comes from the frequency piece that I was speaking of. Is there is this intelligent wisdom that is within these medicines in a lot of ways, and they do truly call you.
Yeah, I truly do believe that, certain things call us at certain times in our life. Anything else, Tiffany, that you think is really helpful for people to know or understand about microdosing or about golden rule in particular?
I would say that if you're listening to this podcast, it probably is potentially calling you. You found your way here, and do your education, reach out to us, and you can ask any questions that you have, and we're here to support in any way. And there may even be some of you that are listening right now that have, the medicine in hand, and maybe you're afraid to even start. And that's really common. We hear that very often in our community, where maybe they buy the product or they have the source and they're still nervous. And so I think that that's very common, and we're here to support in any possible way. And so I just want to let you know that I'm a resource for that. And it is safe, it's effective, and it's a really beautiful practice to cultivate in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, and they come in capsules or gummies, so you can break it open and try a little bit at a time, and
Exactly.
really, really ease into it, in terms of, finding your way into it. So like I said, I have found it incredibly helpful. I am an affiliate for Golden Rule because it has been something that really has been useful to me. And everybody has their different ways. I'm not in a season where I'm taking something every day. It's more of I know when it can be supportive to me, and it works. I have found really well with the nervous system techniques that we talk about on this show. It works really well in conjunction with your other practices, whether that's your somatic practices, your coach, your therapist, your own practices. We're in no way saying, oh, this is going to fix everything in your
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
But I have often found that something like microdosing can be, like, I'm using the word support a lot, so that you feel like you have the support to, go to that therapy appointment, to set that boundary. It can just be that little bit of a nudge so that you feel like you can do something. Again, I'm not saying it's a super pill, but I have found in my own personal experience on times when I'm like really depleted or I'm just really down, or when I was really going through my perimenopause and didn't have my hormones and the right support on track, and I literally felt like I was going crazy, I could microdose and my head would get clear enough to take the action I needed to take.
Mhm.
And I find that like really supportive. So, yeah, anything else I missed, Tiffany, that would be helpful before we wrap up?
Yeah, I would just add to that that think of it like a practice, right? Think of it like if you're going into a meditation practice or therapy or breath work, and it's something that's a resource, a modality, a tool for you to receive in your life. It's very similar to that approach, but it's more so cultivating it within that consistent perspective. And so I just wanted to touch on that piece, and yeah, super grateful to be here and really appreciate you having us on.
All right. And like I said, I am an affiliate for Golden Rule. So you can always receive 10% off of all your purchases from Golden Rule if you go to christinehatzer.com/micro. We'll put that in the show notes. And if people have specific questions or concern, can you be a resource for people, Tiffany?
Yes, yes, absolutely. You can reach out to us directly at hello@goldenrollmushrooms.com and ask for Tiffany and be happy to support you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for being here and sharing your experience and all your wisdom.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.